Hello. Get ready, because this story will blow your mind. Before we dive into this plot of betrayal and revenge, I ask you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your first impressions. Your support means the world. The betrayal, in a whisper. The first crack in Marina Vidal's heart did not arrive with a scream, but with a whisper she heard from her own husband. "She's holding me back," Ricardo Vidal said into his phone, his voice low but full of resentment. He didn't know Marina was in the hallway, her hands still wet from washing dishes, her breath caught between her lungs and her throat. It wasn't the words that hurt the most, but the cold certainty in his tone, the way he spoke of her as if she were an obstacle, not a partner. For 7 years, Marina had lived in silent devotion. She traded the glamorous chaos of boardrooms for bake sales and high fashion for bargains. She tended a small garden, volunteered at the library, and cooked every meal from scratch in her modest kitchen in a quiet neighborhood of Madrid. Her days were humble, predictable, and until recently, filled with love, or so she thought. Ricardo had been the center of her universe, handsome, ambitious, and blessed with a natural charm. He worked as a mid-level financial analyst downtown. To his colleagues, he was a man on the rise, but to Marina, he was the man she believed had chosen her for her soul, not her status. He often lamented his bad luck, how with more capital and better contacts he could dominate the city. Marina listened patiently, never letting him suspect the truth. She could have written him a check large enough to buy the entire skyline he dreamed of, because Marina Vidal was not who she claimed to be. She was not an orphan from a forgotten corner of Spain. She was Marina de la Riva, the sole heiress to the de la Riva Group, a conglomerate valued at over 200 billion euros, with investments in technology, real estate, and energy. The world knew the name de la Riva, but Marina had hidden hers. She met Ricardo in her senior year at a prestigious university in Madrid, studying art history under a false name to escape the suffocating expectations of her billionaire family. Her parents, Elias and Elena de la Riva, had died in a private plane crash when she was 18, leaving her in the care of her formidable grandmother, Augusta de la Riva. Overwhelmed by loss and the crushing weight of her inheritance, Marina longed for anonymity. She wanted a love free from the strings of wealth and influence. Ricardo had seemed like a dream, a scholarship student with passion in his eyes, who spoke to her as if she were a person, not a portfolio. When he proposed a modest life together, far from the relentless glitter of high society, Marina accepted with relief. She put her entire fortune into a blind trust, accessible only through her family lawyer, Javier Santos, and told Ricardo she had nothing but her heart to give. For years, she believed she had made the right choice. They built a life full of small rituals, coffee together in the mornings, long walks in the park on Sundays, handwritten notes hidden in their lunches. Ricardo seemed content until he stopped being so. The change began subtly. He complained about her old-fashioned clothes, about the fact that they couldn't afford the vacations his colleagues bragged about. He compared her to his friends' wives, women draped in diamonds, in dresses worth more than their cars. "Did you see David's fiancée's ring?" he would say after work events. "It must be 10 carats. Her father is a shipping magnate in Singapore." Then his eyes would drop to Marina's simple gold band, and his lips would curl. Just a little. Still, Marina loved him. She convinced herself it was stress, that once his career took off, they would be happy again. But the bitterness in his voice grew sharper, the gaps in their connection wider. Then came the day she heard him on the phone. "She's holding me back," he repeated, his tone full of disdain. If I had someone with real contacts, I could be making million-dollar deals. Marina stood frozen in the hallway, her mind buzzing. He didn't know that the someone he wanted was the woman standing 10 feet away. He didn't know that every bill paid, every home-cooked meal, every ounce of stability in his life had been supported by a woman who could have bought and sold the entire firm he worked for. That night, she sat on the edge of her bed, watching Ricardo sleep. The moonlight outlined the curve of his jaw, the same face she had once cradled in her hands, believing she had found her forever. But now she saw him differently. She saw the ambition that had once attracted her twisting into greed, the love that once felt secure becoming something fragile and transactional. By morning, she decided she wouldn't confront him. Not yet. She needed to be sure. Over the next few weeks, she watched him closely. She noticed the long work dinners, the subtle scent of expensive perfume that wasn't hers on his shirts. She counted the lies, small and casual, about where he had been, who he had met. Lies that rolled off his tongue naturally. Then, one Friday, he came home late, his tie crooked, his hair smelling faintly of jasmine and champagne. "Great night," he said with a smile. "I closed a deal. You wouldn't understand." Marina smiled weakly, not because she didn't understand, but because she understood more than he could imagine. That night, while Ricardo slept, she opened her laptop and sent a secure message to Javier Santos. She hadn't contacted her family lawyer in 7 years, but the subject line was clear: "Activate protocol." Javier's reply came in minutes. "Understood. Do you wish to proceed fully?" Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Once she replied, there would be no turning back. But the image of Ricardo leaning over his phone, talking about her like a weight around his neck, burned in her mind. "Yes," she typed. "Prepare everything. Prepare." The next morning, she poured Ricardo's coffee. She listened to him talk about a colleague's lavish engagement party and hid her fury behind a calm smile. He didn't notice the subtle shift in her eyes, the way she measured every word before speaking. Because Marina was no longer just his wife, she was a woman preparing for war. And the man across the table had no idea that the empire he craved was already hers to command. In less than a month, he would find out. The first time Marina saw them together was a Tuesday afternoon in early spring. The air still held the chill of winter, but the city streets were alive with the hum of rush hour. She had just finished volunteering at the library when she saw Ricardo across the street, standing outside an exclusive wine bar. He wasn't alone. The woman was striking, with long dark hair falling over the shoulders of a camel coat, and red lips that caught the glow of the street lamps. She leaned in as Ricardo spoke, laughing in a way that made her tilt her head back, her hand brushing his arm. Marina stopped walking. She could have told herself it was a client, a work friend. But the way Ricardo looked at her, with fixed eyes and a soft smile, was not the way a man looked at a colleague. Marina turned around before they could see her, walking quickly in the opposite direction. Her heart wasn't pounding from shock. She had suspected it. No. What she felt now was something colder, the confirmation she needed. That night, while Ricardo worked late, she sat at her small dining table with her laptop, combing through public records. The woman's name was Elisa Navarro. She worked as a junior partner at an elite investment firm, the kind that thrived on high-profile contacts. Her online photos showed her at charity galas, rooftop parties, always with a glass of champagne in hand. Marina noted the details, saving them in a private file. The next day, she made her first move. Having tea in a quiet cafe, she met with Javier Santos. The lawyer had aged in the years since she last saw him, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "I want the trust ready," she told him. "Everything. Liquid, if necessary." Javier leaned back in his chair. "That will create a stir, Marina. A withdrawal of that size. Someone will notice." "Let them," she said calmly. "By the time anyone figures it out, it will be too late." Javier studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "And Ricardo?" "He doesn't know yet. He won't know until I'm ready." For the next 2 weeks, Marina lived a double life. To Ricardo, she remained the dutiful wife, cooking, smiling, asking about his day. In reality, she was assembling a team. She discreetly contacted her family's old contacts, a PR strategist who owed her grandmother a favor, a discreet private investigator, a security consultant who once worked for the De La Riva group. To each of them, she told only what they needed to know. The investigator came back with photographs within days. Ricardo and Elisa in a hotel lobby. Ricardo brushing hair from her face. Elisa tucking her hand into his as they walked toward a car. Every image had a timestamp, and each one was a nail in the coffin of her marriage. Marina didn't cry. She didn't even feel the anger she had felt before. It was as if her emotions had crystallized into something hard and precise. Every photo went into the file. Every text message she intercepted through the investigator's legal methods was documented, cataloged, stored, both digitally and physically. The real blow came on a Friday night. Ricardo had told her he was at a work dinner. In reality, he was at the Hotel Gran Via, a rooftop restaurant famous for its panoramic views of the city, and even more famous for its waiting list. Elisa was with him. The PR strategist Marina had hired was already there, sitting at the bar with a clear view. The strategist's phone camera captured the moment Ricardo presented Elisa with a small velvet box. The ring inside sparkled under the warm restaurant lights, large enough to catch the eye of every nearby diner. Elisa's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide in fake surprise. Ricardo slid the ring onto her finger, oblivious to the fact that every angle of the scene was being recorded. The strategist sent the video to Marina within minutes. She watched it once, then again. Her hands didn't shake. If anything, they held steady. This was no longer just infidelity. This was public, and soon it would be public on her own terms. The next morning, over breakfast, Ricardo acted as if nothing had happened. He talked about his plans for the weekend, about a possible promotion at work. Marina nodded at the right moments, sipping her coffee, hiding the faintest smile behind the rim of her cup. By Monday, she had already transferred the trust funds into new accounts under her total control. Javier handled the legal complexity, ensuring every move was flawless. At the same time, the PR strategist began seeding subtle rumors through social circles. Whispers of a major acquisition, a De La Riva family name quietly resurfacing in the business press. Ricardo didn't notice. He was too busy enjoying his secret romance, too convinced of his own cleverness. One afternoon, Marina heard him on the phone again. This time, he was talking to Elisa. "She's complacent," he said. "She has no ambition. She would never survive in my world. You, on the other hand, you understand power." Marina closed her eyes, letting the words settle into the steel she was forging inside herself. What would you do in Marina's situation? Would you confront Ricardo immediately or follow her plan? Let me know your opinion in the comments. The following week, Elisa made her own mistake. She posted a photo on social media, a glass of champagne, the city skyline in the background, and Ricardo's unmistakable watch in the frame. The photo was quickly deleted, but not before the investigator archived it. Another piece for the file. With her evidence stacked and her resources in place, Marina was ready for the next step, but she knew patience was her greatest weapon. Every day she remained silent was another day Ricardo walked deeper into the trap. It was a Thursday afternoon when she received the call that would accelerate everything. It came from an old acquaintance from Madrid's philanthropic circuit. "Marina, I heard you're coming to the Marqueses de Vega Gala next month. I can't wait to see you." Marina hadn't planned to attend. The Marqueses de Vega Gala was one of the most exclusive events in the city, a magnet for the wealthy and ambitious. But now she saw its potential. Ricardo had always dreamed of being invited, but had never been on the list. Eliza, however, would give anything to be seen there. "Of course," Marina replied smoothly. "I'll be there." She hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long moment. The gala would be the perfect stage. By then, her reappearance as a De La Riva would be underway. By then, the right people would know exactly who she was, and exactly who Ricardo had discarded. She imagined walking into that ballroom, the chandeliers glittering, conversations stopping as faces turned toward her, Elisa's smile faltering, Ricardo's expression changing from confusion to dawning horror. It was almost time. But first, she needed to make sure that when Ricardo fell, he didn't just lose her. He would lose everything. The weeks leading up to the Marqueses de Vega Gala unfolded like a chess match. Only Marina knew she was playing. Every move was deliberate, every step calculated to prepare Ricardo for a fall he would never see coming. Her first move was securing allies. Javier introduced her to two board members of the De La Riva group, who had always respected her parents. One controlled significant shares in the company's energy sector, the other in its technology division. During a discreet lunch at a private club, Marina explained her plan. Not the personal betrayal, but the business angle. "A leadership shakeup is coming," she told them. "I intend to be ready when it happens." Both men agreed to support her. Her second move was financial. She quietly invested in a series of strategic acquisitions through holding companies registered under different names. Ricardo didn't know, but the rumors he was hearing at work about mysterious investors buying up assets in his industry all led back to her. The very ground beneath his career was shifting, and he was too busy taking the other woman to dinner to notice. At home, she played her role to perfection. She asked about his day, laughed at the right times, and even cooked his favorite meals. It was a performance that would have fooled anyone, except the actress herself. Behind the calm smile, she was memorizing his habits, noting every lie, every absence, every financial transaction he tried to hide. The private investigator discovered something Marina had suspected, but hadn't confirmed. Ricardo had opened a separate bank account. It wasn't much yet, but the deposits were suspiciously timed with his client meetings. Marina didn't confront him. She simply added the bank statements to her growing file. Then came the first sign. One Thursday, Ricardo came home later than usual, irritation written on his face. "Someone has been sniffing around the office," he said, tossing his briefcase onto the sofa. "Asking questions about me, about my future plans. Do you know anything about that?" Marina didn't look up from the book in her hands. "Why would I?" she asked, her tone soft. He studied her for a moment, as if trying to read something beneath her calm. "It's just a coincidence, that's all." She offered him a small smile. "Maybe someone is finally noticing all your hard work." If he heard the slight trace of irony in her voice, he didn't comment. The following week, Marina made a subtle but crucial adjustment. She moved most of her personal belongings, including heirlooms and irreplaceable documents, to a secure storage facility under her legal name, Marina de la Riva. Ricardo didn't notice. What he did notice, however, was that her appearance was changing. She began wearing tailored dresses again, subtle, but undeniably expensive. Jewelry that had been packed away for years now glittered on her wrists and neck. When he asked her about it, she shrugged. "I thought I'd update my wardrobe for the gala." "The gala?" His brow furrowed. "What gala?" "The Marcheses de Vega gala," she said, sipping her tea as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. "I've been invited." He looked at her, incredulous. "That's impossible. Those people don't even know who you are." Her lips curled into a soft, inscrutable smile. "You'd be surprised who remembers me." From that moment on, Ricardo's curiosity turned into something sharper. He started asking more questions about her friends, her schedule, even her phone calls. But Marina had been raised in the De La Riva world. She knew how to keep her secrets. Every answer she gave was truthful enough to sound convincing, but vague enough to reveal nothing. Meanwhile, Elisa was making her own preparations for the gala. The investigator reported that she had been telling friends she expected Ricardo to propose officially soon, claiming he was going to leave his wife after the event. Marina saved those voicemails too. As the date approached, the PR strategist executed the final phase of Marina's public reappearance. Articles began appearing in business columns about an influential heiress returning to the corporate stage. The articles didn't name her directly, but they hinted strongly, citing her education, her family history, and her role in upcoming acquisitions. It was enough to spark speculation among Madrid's elite. One night, just a week before the gala, Ricardo came home unusually early. He stood in the doorway of their bedroom, watching her as she organized papers in a sleek leather folder. "You've been different lately," he said finally. Marina looked up, her expression open. "Different how?" "More sure of yourself, dressed up, busy with things you don't talk about." She tilted her head. "Isn't that what you wanted? Someone with ambition?" The question hung between them, sharper than either expected. Ricardo opened his mouth, then closed it again. "Just don't forget who has always been here for you," he said, the words holding more warning than comfort. When he left the room, Marina allowed herself a single deep breath. She was starting to feel it. The shift in balance, the shift in control. But he still had no idea how far she had gone. On the morning of the gala, Marina stood in front of her mirror, the final dress she had chosen hanging over the chair. It was a custom-made piece, designed for her by a friend in Paris. Elegant, impering, and impossible to ignore. She clasped a diamond necklace around her throat, one that had belonged to her grandmother. Her phone vibrated. It was Javier. "Everything is in place. Tonight is the night." She sent him a single reply. "Make sure the photographers are ready." By evening, the ballroom of the Palace Hotel would shine with Madrid's most powerful. Elisa would be there, expecting a proposal. Ricardo would be there, expecting admiration. And Marina would be there to deliver something completely different. Because once the lights hit her, there would be no turning back. The grand ballroom of the Palace Hotel glowed under crystal chandeliers, the air alive with the hum of Madrid's elite. Dressed in silk, they glided across the polished marble, the scent of roses and expensive perfume mingling in the air. Waiters moved between conversation groups, balancing trays of champagne flutes that caught the light like tiny suns. Ricardo stood near the entrance with Elisa by his side, looking around as if he had finally arrived where he belonged. Elisa wore a champagne-colored dress with a slit that drew more than a few stares, her hand coiled possessively around his arm. She leaned in and whispered, "You'll introduce me to the Marcheses de Vega tonight, right?" Ricardo smiled. "Just stay close. They'll know who we are soon enough." What he didn't know was that the Marcheses de Vega already knew exactly who was coming. and it wasn't him. The room stirred as the doors opened. A silence fell so suddenly it was almost audible, as if the orchestra had missed a beat. Marina entered. She wore a deep emerald green silk dress that hugged her figure with an elegance money couldn't fake. The diamond necklace at her throat caught the chandelier light, scattering it across the room like a constellation. Her hair was swept up in a polished bun, a single diamond slide gleaming just above her ear. Every step she took seemed to part the crowd effortlessly. And she wasn't alone. By her side walked Santiago Ortega, president of Ortega Holdings, one of the most powerful financiers in Madrid, and a close friend of her late father. Marina smiled as she moved through the crowd, her arm linked with Santiago's. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Gazes followed her. Whispers raced around the room. Ricardo's smile faltered. He blinked, as if unsure his eyes were telling him the truth. Elisa's fingers tightened on his arm. Who is that?" He didn't answer. Santiago guided Marina toward the center of the ballroom. The hosts of the gala themselves greeted her warmly, as if she were an old friend. Glasses clinked. A photographer's flash went off. Then another. Within minutes, the unspoken hierarchy of the room had shifted. Marina was no longer the silent wife no one noticed. She was the guest everyone wanted to be seen with. Ricardo's pulse raced. He recognized that necklace. He had once asked about it years ago, and Marina had told him it was a family heirloom, nothing valuable. Now he was beginning to understand just how much he had been in the dark. When Santiago excused himself to speak with the mayor, Marina found herself face to face with her husband. "Marina," he said, his voice low and his smile tight. "What are you doing here?" Her gaze swept over him with cold precision. Enjoying the evening, Elisa shifted uncomfortably beside him. "Didn't you say your wife was invited?" Marina's eyes met hers, steady and unreadable. "You must be Elisa. I've heard a lot about you." Elisa's lips parted, then closed again. Something in Marina's tone, polite but sharp as glass, left her without a retort. Before Ricardo could recover, the matriarch of the Marqueses de Vega approached, linking her arm with Marina's. "Darling, they're ready for you." "For me?" repeated Ricardo, confusion flashing in his eyes. "Yes," said the Lady of Vega, glancing at him briefly before turning to Marina. "The keynote speech. We were thrilled you agreed to speak. The De La Riva name means a lot to our cause." Ricardo stood still. Elisa's head whipped toward him, but her eyes were fixed on Marina. "De La Riva," she repeated, the word slow, as if she were trying to understand its size. Marina's smile was flawless. "I guess it was time you knew, Ricardo." The next 20 minutes were a masterclass in quiet power. Marina took the stage, speaking effortlessly about philanthropy, innovation, and the importance of strategic investment in Madrid's future. Her voice was steady, her posture regal, her presence magnetic. The crowd hung on every word. Cameras flashed. Every influential figure in the room now knew her name, and by extension, knew exactly who Ricardo had been married to all this time. From his spot near the back, Ricardo felt a twisting in his stomach. Elisa's grip on his arm had loosened. Her eyes darted around the room, registering the shift in how people looked at them. Or rather, didn't look at them at all. They were invisible now, and Marina was the center of gravity. When the speech ended, applause rang through the ballroom. Marina stepped off the stage into a whirlwind of handshakes and business card exchanges. Ricardo tried to intercept her, but Santiago Ortega was by her side again, guiding her toward a circle of CEOs and politicians. By the time Ricardo reached them, She was mid-conversation with the governor. He touched her elbow lightly. "We need to talk." Her eyes darted to him, cool and distant. "Really?" "Yes," he hissed, leaning in. "What the hell was that up there? De la Riva? Since when?" She cut him off with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Since before I met you. But you never asked, did you?" He opened his mouth, but she was already turning away, greeting another guest as if he didn't exist. Elisa pulled at his arm. "Ricardo, didn't you tell me she was—" "Shut up!" he snapped, the weight of the night pressing down on him like a vice. Across the room, Marina accepted another glass of champagne. Her diamond necklace caught the light again, and she could feel Ricardo's stare burning her back. But she didn't turn around. Not yet, because tonight wasn't about confrontation. It was about planting the seed, and Ricardo was already starting to realize that whatever game he thought he was playing, he was hopelessly outmatched. And this was just the first move. The Marquesas de Vega gala ended in a blur of sparkling conversations, clinking glasses, and discreet deals. Marina left before midnight, not because she was tired, but because she knew Ricardo would follow her. That was the point. Sure enough, 15 minutes after she got into her waiting car, his black sedan pulled up behind her at the gates of their suburban home. She could see him in the rearview mirror, jaw tight, shoulders rigid, moving with the restless energy of a man whose world had tilted in ways he couldn't control. She was already in the kitchen when the front door slammed shut. "Marina!" His voice echoed down the hall, sharp enough to startle the cat off the counter. "I'm here," she replied, her tone exasperatingly calm. He appeared in the doorway, still in his tuxedo, tie loosened, eyes glaring. What the hell was that tonight? She tilted her head slightly, as if seeking clarity. "You'll have to be more specific." "Don't play games with me," he snapped. "De la Riva. Have you been a De la Riva this whole time? Do you have any idea how that makes me look?" 7 years, Marina. 7 years I've been looking for opportunities, struggling While I what? She interrupted, her voice steady but sharp. Lived the life you claimed you wanted? Supported you? Stayed quiet when you complained about everything we didn't have, knowing perfectly well I could have given you everything? He froze, unnerved by the precision of her words. "You lied to me." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "No, Ricardo, I didn't lie. You never asked. You were too busy talking about what you wanted to see to notice what was right in front of you." He took a step closer, lowering his voice as if the neighbors could hear. "You should have told me. We could have used it," she interrupted, her eyes locked on his. "Parade me around to get contacts, take credit for deals you didn't make, spend until there was nothing left?" His mouth opened and then closed again. For the first time, she saw hesitation in his eyes. "Marina, I am your husband. We are supposed to share everything." Her smile was sharp. "That's funny. You didn't share Elisa with me?" The color drained from his face. "That's not what this is about." "Oh, it is exactly what this is about," she said, her voice soft but lethal. "You thought I was harmless, a quiet wife who would never know anything, never expect more. And because you thought that, you allowed yourself to believe you could have both, me at home and her on your arm." He took another step forward, the air between them taut as a wire. "You are twisting this. Elisa means—" "Careful," she warned, her gaze unwavering. "You are about to say something you won't be able to take back." For a moment, the kitchen was silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Ricardo's eyes searched hers, looking for some trace of the woman he had known, the one who would listen, forgive, and fix his mistakes. But she was gone, replaced by someone he couldn't predict. Finally, he exhaled and took a step back. So what now? Are you going to leave me? Her smile returned, slow and deliberate. If I were going to leave you, Ricardo, you would already be alone. No, I think I'll stay. For now. He frowned. For now? Consider it a courtesy, she said, turning toward the coffee maker as if the conversation were over. It gives you time to think about who you are dealing with. He didn't move for several seconds. When he finally left the kitchen, she could hear the creak of the stairs under his weight, each step heavier than the last. Marina poured herself a cup of coffee and took it to the small desk in the corner. She opened her laptop, the glow illuminating her face as she reviewed the investigator's latest report. More photographs, more messages, more ammunition. She didn't need to scream. She didn't need to kick him out. Not yet. The real damage wouldn't be done in this kitchen or in the privacy of their home. It would be done where it mattered most to Ricardo, in the eyes of everyone whose approval he craved. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from the PR strategist. We've confirmed Elisa will attend the Castillo Foundation dinner next week. Do we proceed? Marina replied. Absolutely. She leaned back in her chair, letting the aroma of the coffee envelop her like a slow-burning fuse. Ricardo thought the explosion had been tonight, but that was just the spark. By the time the fire reached him, there would be nothing left to save. The Castillo Foundation dinner. It was more subdued than the Marquesas de Vega Gala, but no less exclusive. Held in the Foundation's historic castle, it was the kind of event where every handshake could mean millions, and every whispered conversation had the potential to shift power in Madrid. Marina arrived exactly 20 minutes after the start time, ensuring she was noticed without looking like she was trying. She wore a midnight blue silk dress, the fabric flowing around her like water, her grandmother's sapphire earrings catching the soft candlelight. This time, she came alone. She didn't need an escort. Her name was enough. Across the room, she saw Ricardo and Elisa before they saw her. Elisa wore a bright crimson dress that clung a little too tight, her smile a little too bright. Ricardo was playing his part. Attentive, self-assured, but there was a tension in his posture Marina hadn't seen before. He was looking for her. She let them wait. Instead, she moved through the room with precision, greeting donors, exchanging pleasantries with political figures, pausing for photos with other board members. Every introduction included her full name, Marina de la Riva. She saw the flicker of recognition in people's eyes, the way conversations shifted when she spoke. Half an hour later, she finally approached them. Ricardo's face tightened. Elisa's widened in surprise. Marina, Ricardo said stiffly. Ricardo, Elisa. Marina's tone was warm, almost friendly. You both look comfortable. Elisa straightened, sensing the subtle edge beneath the words. We were talking about the auction later. Ricardo is going to bid on a trip to the Amalfi Coast. Oh, really? Marina smiled, tilting her head. How generous of you, Ricardo, considering your recent financial challenges. He stiffened. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course not, she replied smoothly, before turning to Elisa. I heard congratulations are in order. Rumor has it you're expecting an official change in your relationship soon. Elisa's painted smile faltered. I don't like gossip. No need, Marina said, her voice soft but cutting. I already know. Before either of them could respond, the dinner bell rang, and guests began moving toward the long banquet tables. Marina took her seat near the front, next to the evening's keynote speaker, a tech entrepreneur who had just signed a lucrative partnership with one of her holding companies. From her vantage point, she could see Ricardo and Elisa several tables back. Elisa's smile was gone now, her posture rigid. The true moment came during the auction. A week earlier, Marina had discreetly arranged for a special lot to be added. A weekend getaway at the Hotel Gran Via, the very rooftop hotel where Ricardo had secretly proposed to Elisa. She had even provided the photograph for the display screen, one taken by her investigator, showing the exact moment Ricardo slid the ring onto Elisa's finger. The image had been carefully cropped so that only their hands were visible, but the watch on Ricardo's wrist was unmistakable. When the lot appeared on the screen, murmurs were rippled through the room. Ricardo's face drained of color. Elisa stared straight ahead, frozen. "Do I hear an opening bid of 10,000? The auctioneer said. Marina raised her paddle without hesitation. 10! Another bidder across the room joined in, and the number climbed. Ricardo kept his head down, but Marina could feel his gaze burning into her. She didn't care if she won the lot. The point had already been made. By the time the gavel fell at 15,000 to another bidder, the image was burned into the minds of half the room. During dessert, Ricardo finally approached her, his voice low but filled with anger. "That was deliberate." Marina sipped her coffee. "If you mean attending the dinner, yes, I was invited." "You know what I mean." His eyes met hers, calm and unwavering. "I've learned something, Ricardo. If you want to hurt someone, you don't scream. You let the truth do the work for you." He gritted his teeth. "What do you want from me?" She leaned in just close enough for only him to hear. "Patience, because this is just the beginning." Leaving him there, she returned to her seat as the final speeches began. She didn't need to look back to know he was watching her, torn between fury and fear. Across the table, one of the Castillo Foundation board members leaned in. "You know, when I heard De La Riva was returning to Madrid, I didn't expect this." Marina smiled faintly. Neither did he. The night ended with polite applause and discreet farewells. Outside, the cool night air wrapped around her as she descended the stone steps. A sleek black car waited at the curb. Javier's driver. She slid into the back seat, the city lights reflecting in the window. Her phone vibrated with a message from the investigator. "You'll want to see tonight's footage." The police made a call after the auction. Very interesting. Marina's lips curled. Another piece for the file. Another step toward the inevitable. And soon, Ricardo wouldn't just feel the walls closing in on him. He would realize there was no way out. By Monday morning, Ricardo could feel it. Something in the air at work had changed. Conversations stopped when he entered the break room. Colleagues avoided eye contact. His assistant, usually chatty, kept her answers short and her gaze fixed on her computer. It didn't take long to figure out why. Someone had circulated the photo from the Castillo Foundation auction around the office, even though the image didn't show Elisa's face. The watch and the distinctive cufflinks Ricardo wore at the event were enough for people to connect the dots. By lunch, he had been called into his supervisor's office. "Ricardo, the partners are concerned," she began carefully. "Your personal affairs are starting to affect the firm. We can't afford that kind of attention right now, especially with the merger negotiations underway." "It's just a photo," he protested. Her expression didn't change. "Image matters. Keep it clean, or there will be consequences." He left the meeting with a knot in his stomach. For the first time, the thought crossed his mind that his position might not be secure. That afternoon, Elisa was waiting for him at his apartment. She had been spending more nights there lately, away from the house he still shared with Marina. She was pacing back and forth, phone in hand. "Why didn't you tell me she was a De La Riva?" she demanded the moment he walked in. "I didn't know," he snapped, tossing his coat on the sofa. "Now it's everywhere," Elisa said, her voice rising. in the society pages, in the business news, and every article calls her Marina de la Riva Vidal. Do you know how that makes me look? Like I'm the other woman trying to steal from an heiress. That's social suicide. Ricardo pinched the bridge of his nose. It's just temporary. She's getting attention, and then it will pass. Elisa crossed her arms. Do you really think she's doing this for no reason? Ricardo, she's not just showing up. She's targeting us. He didn't answer, but the knot in his stomach tightened. While Ricardo and Elisa flailed, Marina moved with precision. Javier had already finalized her control over the trust assets, and the PR strategist was pushing subtle narratives in the press. Articles about women reclaiming power after betrayal, about modern heiresses reshaping the business landscape. None of them named Ricardo, but the timing made the implication clear to those in the know. Her next move was financial. Through her holding companies, she began quietly acquiring a competitor to Ricardo's firm. She didn't need to own it completely, just enough to influence their hiring decisions. Once the deal was in place, she knew the firm's management would start rethinking who they wanted on their payroll. The investigator continued to give her a steady stream of information. Elisa had started contacting recruiters, apparently testing her options in case Ricardo's situation worsened. Ricardo, meanwhile, had been seen meeting with a mid-level investor he had once mocked for being small-time. Desperation was becoming visible. One Thursday evening, Marina came home to find Ricardo waiting for her in the living room. He looked tired, tie loosened, hair a bit messy. "We need to talk," he said. She set down her bag. "About what?" "About whatever it is you're doing. The galas, the dinners, the press. You're trying to make me look bad." He tilted his head, looking at him as if he had just confessed something trivial. "Ricardo, you're taking care of that all by yourself." He clenched his jaw. "You don't have to destroy me." His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "No. After what you've done?" He ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I made mistakes, but I still care about you." She cut him off with a quiet laugh. "Care? You care about losing. That's all this means to you." The silence between them was tense with unspoken things. Finally, Ricardo spoke again. "If you want a divorce, just say it." Marina's smile was faint, almost pitying. "A divorce would be too easy for you." That night, Ricardo lay awake staring at the ceiling while Marina slept soundly in the guest bedroom. He didn't know that the next morning an announcement would be published in the business press. Vidal Holdings acquires a majority stake in Amanecer Investments. To most readers, it was just another deal. To Ricardo, it was the beginning of the end. Amanecer Investments was his firm's biggest rival, and everyone knew the two companies didn't get along. By the time he got to the office, the whispers had turned into open stares. One colleague even muttered, "Guess we know whose side she's on," as he passed. Back home, Marina reviewed the final seating chart for the upcoming Madrid Philanthropy Summit. Ricardo and Elisa were both on the guest list, invited by a mutual contact who had no idea what was coming. Marina smiled to herself. The summit would be the perfect venue for the final blow, and this time, there would be no doubt about who was pulling the strings. The Madrid Philanthropy Summit was an annual convergence of the city's wealthiest, most influential, and ambitious. Held in the glass-walled atrium of the Madrid Convention Center, it overlooked the glittering harbor like a stage for power plays. Marina arrived early, not to socialize, but to prepare. She knew exactly where Ricardo and Elisa would be sitting. She had ensured it. The table assignment placed them directly in front of the main podium, with no way to avoid seeing her every time she spoke. She chose her outfit with surgical precision, a tailored white suit with clean, sharp lines, the kind that projected both authority and control. Around her neck rested the sapphire pendant that had belonged to her mother, instantly recognizable to anyone who knew the De La Riva family. Ricardo and Elisa arrived just after the first hour. Elisa wore a shimmering silver dress that looked more disco than charity event. Ricardo's suit was impeccable, but his expression betrayed the strain of the last few weeks. He scanned the room and froze when he saw Marina at the head table. She didn't look at him immediately. Instead, she greeted other guests, spoke with organizers, and signed a few documents for the silent auction. Only when she felt his gaze burning into her did she finally meet his eyes. A single look, cold and unflinching, before returning to her conversation. The morning sessions passed without incident. Ricardo and Elisa kept their heads down, though Marina noticed Elisa's restless movement, the way her smile faltered when introduced to certain guests. News travels fast in Madrid social circles, and Marina had ensured the right people knew enough about Elisa's ambitions to keep their distance. After lunch, it was time for the round table on ethics and philanthropy. Marina was the final speaker. She walked onto the stage without notes. Her voice carried effortlessly across the glass atrium. "We speak of generosity," she began, as if it were simply the act of giving. "But true generosity is about integrity, about aligning our public actions with our private behavior. When those two things are out of sync, trust is lost. And once trust is gone, no amount of money can buy it back." She let the words hang for a moment, her gaze sweeping the room. "In my own life," she continued, "I have seen how betrayal doesn't just hurt the person it is aimed at. It spreads, damaging reputations, partnerships, and entire communities. That is why tonight's focus is not just on giving, but on accountability." The silence was palpable. At a back table, a journalist scribbled furiously. Cameras clicked. Then came the moment she had planned. "Sometimes," she said, "those who present themselves as worthy partners in public, in private, undermine the very trust they claim to uphold." As she spoke, the large projection screen behind her lit up, not with slides, but with a short video. It began with a blurry clip of Ricardo and Elisa on the roof of the Hotel Gran Via, Ricardo sliding the ring onto her finger. The camera angle was discreet, but unmistakable. Gasps were heard from the crowd. Marina didn't look back at the screen. She didn't need to. She kept speaking as if the footage were simply an illustration of her point. When deception is exposed, it is not just a personal failure. It is a public failure, and those who build on dishonesty will always watch their foundations collapse. The video ended, replaced by the event logo. The applause that followed was polite, but tinged with electric tension. Everyone in the room understood the message and the target. Ricardo sat frozen, his face a mask of forced composure. Elisa's lips were pressed into a thin line. Her eyes darted toward the exit. When the panel concluded, guests began to murmur, some staring openly at Ricardo and Elisa. Marina stepped off the stage, accepting handshakes and congratulations from the organizers. She could feel the shift in the room. Ricardo was no longer the charming, aspiring financier. He was the man caught in the wrong story, at the wrong time, with the wrong woman. Ricardo finally approached her near the refreshment table. His voice was low, but trembling with rage. "That was cruel." She sipped her water. "It was honest. You're trying to destroy me in front of everyone I know." She met his gaze, unblinking. "Ricardo, I'm not trying. I'm succeeding." Before he could respond, Elisa grabbed his arm. "We're leaving," she said through gritted teeth. They left without saying goodbye to anyone. Conversations followed him out the door like a trail of smoke. Marina stayed until the end, chatting with donors, securing pledges for the foundation, which she was relaunching under her own name. By the time she left, the winter sun was low over the harbor, tinting the water in golden hues. Her phone vibrated. A message from Javier. Amenisa Investments is moving forward with the hiring freeze. Your rival's board just made it official. Marina smiled faintly. Ricardo didn't know it yet, but the damage to his career was about to become permanent. And when he found out, it would be too late to say anything. Or anyone. The call came on a Wednesday morning. Ricardo had been sitting at his desk, staring at a spreadsheet he couldn't focus on, when his supervisor's voice summoned him to the boardroom. The partners were waiting, every single one of them, sitting in a row like a tribunal. We have reviewed recent events, the senior partner began, her tone clipping. Between the merger complications and the image issues from your personal life, we have concluded it is best to part ways. Ricardo's pulse raced. Are you firing me? Your contract will be honored, she said, sliding a folder across the table. But effective immediately, your position here is terminated. He wanted to argue, to beg, but the looks on their faces told him it wouldn't matter. He was escorted out by security before lunch. By the time he got to his apartment, Elisa was packing her bags. Where are you going? He demanded. She didn't even stop folding a sequined dress into her suitcase. Do you think I'm going to stay for this? Everyone is talking, Ricardo. I'm being frozen out of every circle I've worked to get into, and now you've lost your job. I can fix this, he insisted, though the words sounded hollow even to him. She laughed, a short, bitter sound. You can't fix this. She is dismantling you piece by piece, and you don't even know how deep it goes. Elisa, no. She zipped her suitcase. Call me when you're not a sinking ship. She was gone in less than an hour. For the rest of the day, Ricardo sat in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on him. The phone calls from friends stopped. Emails went unanswered. Even his social media accounts were a graveyard of past boasts and unreturned messages. That night, there was a knock at the door. When he opened it, Marina was standing there, dressed in a simple black coat, her expression unreadable. Can I come in? She asked. He stepped aside, not knowing what else to do. She walked in slowly. Her gaze swept the apartment, the expensive furniture, the empty champagne bottles, the half-packed boxes. You've been busy, she said softly. Why are you here? His voice was raspy. To tell you something. She turned to face him fully. Everything that has happened, the gala, the dinner, the summit, that was just me pulling back the curtain. The rest you did to yourself. His jaw tightened. You planned all this. I prepared for it, she corrected. The moment I saw you at that wine bar with her, I knew the man I thought I married didn't exist. So I stopped protecting you. Ricardo's hands curled into fists at his sides. You could have left me. She shook her head. Leaving you would have been a gift. You didn't deserve one. He took a step toward her. Did you want to ruin me? No, she said, her voice low and precise. I wanted you to understand that when you betray someone who gave you everything, the cost is everything you have left. The silence between them was heavy, filled with all the things he couldn't say, apologies he didn't believe in, excuses she wouldn't accept. Finally, she reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. She placed it on the counter. That is your severance from the trust accounts. I am cutting you off completely. Consider it the last payment you will ever receive from me. He looked at the envelope, but didn't touch it. What am I supposed to do now? She met his eyes. Survive or don't. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. With that, she turned and walked toward the door. Marina, he called out. She stopped, hand on the doorknob. "I never thought you would do this to me," he said. His voice cracked a little. She looked over her shoulder. "That's because you never thought I could." The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving him in the dark, silent apartment. That night, Ricardo scrolled through his phone until he reached an old photo. The two of them on their wedding day, smiling, oblivious to the future. He stared at it until the screen went black, the room around him shrinking into the darkness. Across town, Marina sat in her penthouse office, reviewing the final documents for the launch of the new De La Riva Foundation. Her name was back in place, and her reputation was stronger than ever. The people who mattered knew her story now, and they knew she had the strength to protect herself. But it wasn't over yet. There was one last stage remaining, a public event that would cement her return and leave Ricardo with nothing but the memory of what he had lost. And when that night came, she would make sure it was unforgettable. 2 months later, the most anticipated event of the season arrived in Madrid, the relaunch gala of the De La Riva Foundation. Invitations had been coveted for weeks, with only the city's most influential figures on the guest list. It would be held at the historic Langston Hall, a venue reserved for the kind of moments that would be talked about for decades. For Marina, it was more than just a gala. It was the complete restoration of her place in the world, on her own terms, with her own name. Every detail had been planned with precision, from the champagne imported from her family's vineyards in France to the orchids flown in that morning. She arrived early, entering the grand ballroom in a floor-length deep gold gown, a color that radiated strength and warmth. The sapphire pendant rested against her collarbone, glittering under the chandeliers. She moved through final checks with her team, calm but electric inside. Tonight was her night. Guests began to arrive, camera flashes greeting each one. Politicians, CEOs, philanthropists, and old money families walked through the entrance, eager to be seen in attendance. Marina greeted them with genuine warmth, introducing partners for the foundation's new initiatives. The press was everywhere, capturing faces, laughter, the clinking of glasses, and then, almost predictably, Ricardo appeared. He wasn't on the guest list, but he had found a way in, probably through some desperate contact who owed him a favor. He wore a dark suit that didn't fit him as well as before, and there was an edge of desperation in his eyes. He approached as she was speaking with the mayor. "Marina, can we talk?" She didn't break her smile, simply excusing herself from the conversation. "You shouldn't be here, Ricardo. I just need a minute." She studied him for a moment. 1 minute. They stepped into a quieter corner of the ballroom. The music and chatter were still a soft hum around them. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice low. "I made mistakes, I know. But maybe we could start over." Her expression didn't change. "Ricardo, you didn't just break a promise. You broke the foundation of trust we stood on. And when it crumbled, you thought you could simply build again on the same ground. You can't." He swallowed hard. "I've lost everything." "That was your choice," she said simply. Before he could respond, the event coordinator approached. "Simona de la Riva, we are ready for your speech." She turned to Ricardo. "Enjoy the rest of your evening from the sidelines." She walked toward the stage as applause erupted. The ballroom lights softened. A single spotlight illuminated her as she approached the podium. "Good evening," she began. Her voice carried with quiet authority. "Tonight is about more than the relaunch of a foundation. It is about resilience, about reclaiming your voice when others have tried to take it away." She spoke of the foundation's projects, educational programs, grants for female entrepreneurs, community revitalization efforts. But between her words was a deeper message. One the crowd could feel. "There was a time," she said, "when I believed love meant hiding parts of myself to make someone else feel bigger. I was wrong. True partnership isn't about dimming your light for someone else's comfort. It is about shining together and knowing that if someone cannot stand in that light with you, they have no place in your future." The applause intensified, filling the ballroom like a wave. Cameras flashed. In the corner, Ricardo stood still, his face unreadable, as the crowd rose to give her a standing ovation. When the speech ended, Marina stepped down into a sea of congratulations. Deals were discussed, promises made, photographs taken. Her name, Marina de la Riva, was on everyone's lips, no longer hidden, no longer tied to anyone but herself. By midnight, the ballroom was a whirlwind of music and laughter. Marina stood on the balcony overlooking the harbor, city lights glittering below. Javier joined her, handing her a glass of champagne. "It is done," he said simply. She nodded. "It is just the beginning." They clinked glasses. She took a slow sip, feeling the cool air on her skin, the hum of satisfaction in her chest. Somewhere behind her, Ricardo had already left. His exit had gone unnoticed, and that was the final truth. He was no longer part of her story. Marina smiled to herself, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Because this wasn't just revenge, it was rebirth. That's right, my friends. Our story has come full circle. And if you are still here with me right now, watching until the end, I believe something in this journey has touched your hearts, in a way you didn't expect. Maybe it sparked a memory. Maybe it reflected something you have been through. Or maybe it simply reminded you of the strength you already carry within. You see, this wasn't just a story about betrayal and revenge. It was a story about resilience, about choosing not to let someone else's actions define your worth. The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Marina could have broken, but instead she chose to rebuild herself, not for him, but for herself. There is another quote by Marcus Aurelius that I often think of. "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That is exactly what we saw here. She didn't sink to Ricardo's level. She rose above him, reclaiming her life with dignity, power, and grace. Maybe that is the real lesson for you and me. We can't always control what people do to us, but we can always choose our response. We can choose to heal, to grow, to stand taller than before. And in doing so, we become untouchable. So if you are going through something right now, a heartbreak, a betrayal, a loss, remember, you are stronger than you think. The pain you feel now is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of your comeback. If this journey moved you, even a little, I would love for you to like, share, and subscribe so we can keep telling stories that speak to the heart. Because somewhere, someone needs to hear this next chapter. And maybe, just maybe, it is exactly the hope they have been waiting for. Thank you for joining me.